Good day, everyone. I'm Anna Marie M. Balilong. Today, I will discuss the chapter 2 authentic assessment and assessment of process and product. Authentic assessment. Authentic assessment are the best way to determine life assessment. So, how to incorporate authentic assessment into the classroom? So, for example, art student should be assessed by their artistic talents. So next, apply learned knowledge. All students must one day apply what they learned in school to work settings. Lastly is rubrics. So mostly tied to authentic assessment. So authentic assessment are mostly subjective in nature. So rubrics are needed to put criterion and goals for your students. So criterion reference measure. So when we say criterion reference measure, the goal of criterion reference is to measure the skills and knowledge that the students had mastered. So now we're going to discuss about the characteristic of authentic assessment. So first, authentic assessment requires the students to perform meaningful tasks in real-world situation. So it means that authentic assessment refers to an assessment that requires students to apply what they've learned in new circumstances or situations. So typically, one that mirrors what would be expected of them is in that discipline or field. So second is it promotes the development of HOTS or HOTS because the evaluators, including the self and peer, have to think wisely and precisely the reading most appropriate to the student's performance to excellent down to poor. So it means that it develop higher order thinking skill. For example, writing a school paper. So this assessment must challenge your students to create and solve problems. Also, let your students' imagination create these assessments. So third is it tenders direct evidence of application and construction of knowledge and skills acquired. So it gives direct evidence of application and construction of knowledge and skills of the students. For example, students construct a small house made of waste sandpaper and crumbled paper. So number 4 is it includes portfolio collection of entries. So it means portfolio can be a physical collection of students' work that includes materials such as assignments, journal entries, completed tasks, artworks, lab reports, and etc. So number 5 is it demonstrates application of a particular knowledge and skills. An everyday example of skill knowledge is, for example, is the ability to ride a bicycle. So skills knowledge is acquired slowly to related experience. For example, a maintenance student who is learning to will typically burns or crack the metal being welded. So while an expert welder's work is free in such imperfections. Number 6, it fosters role playing of the lessons learned by the student, which serve as show window to them. So the best way to differentiate instruction is to give students a choice how the show their how they show their learning. So all students learn in their own way and they need to able to show their individual skills and interests as long as they're able to demonstrate a certain skills. Assessment should be more about the process than the product. Number 7 is it identifies performance of students' acquired skills and expertise. So, where it identifies the specific skills and expertise of the students, for example, the students is expert in doing path made by mud. So through this skill acquired, students can demonstrate the process on how to do the path. That's why other students may also learn that skills. Number 8 is it assess directly holistic projects by multiple human judgment like self, peer, subject teacher, and teacher advisor. So it means it assess directly project by the help of peers, subject teacher, and even self. Number 9, it trains the students to evaluate their own work as well as their peers. So through assessment, students can evaluate their own work. The students can acquire basic knowledge and evaluate their ways of doing their work. Number 10 is it is designed on a reference measure rather than norm reference measures. So the strength and weaknesses of the students have been identified rather than compare students' performance with other students. So it means authentic assessment is a criterion reference rather than a reference, and so it identifies strength and weaknesses but not be com- does not be compare students rank their levels of mm, performance. Next, let's describe the traditional assessment and authentic assessment. So first, traditional assessment. These are the conventional methods of testing, which usually produce a written document such as quiz, exam, or paper and pencil test, standardized tests, most state achievement tests, and high school graduation examination are also examples of traditional assessment. So, what is authentic assessment? An assessment that is performance oriented, with assessment that aims to measure not only the correctness of the response but also the thought process involved in arriving at the response, and that encourage students to reflect their own learning, both depth and breadth. So the belief is that instruction will be pushed into a more thoughtful, more reflexive, richer mode as well. Purpose of traditional assessment and authentic assessment. So, traditional assessment, the purpose of traditional assessment is to evaluate if the students have learned the content, to determine whether or not the students are successful in acquiring knowledge, to rank and compare them against standards or other learners. Next is authentic assessment. The purpose of authentic assessment is to measure students' proficiency by asking them to perform real life tasks, to provide feedback and help students manage their own learning, to also evaluate students' competency. Distinction. So traditional assessment is measure student knowledge of the content, while authentic assessment measures students' ability to apply knowledge of the content in real life situation, ability to use, apply what they have learned in meaningful ways. Traditional assessment requires students to demonstrate knowledge by selecting a response, giving correct answers. So usually, test students' proficiency through paper and pencil test, while authentic assessment requires students to demonstrate proficiency by performing relevant tasks, showing application of what has been learned. Next is traditional assessment requires students to practice cognitive activity to recall, recognize, reconstruct body of knowledge that has been taught. While authentic assessment, it provides opportunities for students to construct meaning, new knowledge out of what has been taught. Next is traditional assessment standardized, valid, and reliable. Authentic assessment needs well defined criteria, rubrics, and standards to achieve reliability and validity. Next is traditional assessment is a assessment that is separated from teaching and learning. Test usually comes after instruction to evaluate if the students have successfully learned in the content. While authentic assessment, it is the assessment that is integrated with instructions. Assessment activities happen all throughout instruction to help students improve their learning and help teachers improve their teaching. So examples of traditional assessment. So we have true or false, multiple choice test, standardized test, achievement test, intelligent test, and aptitude test. So while in authentic assessment, these are the examples. First is demonstrations, hands-on experiment, portfolios, projects, multimedia presentations, role plays, recitals, stage play, and exhibits. To better compare traditional and authentic assessment, here's a Venn diagram prepared. So, traditional assessment is a product oriented, while authentic assessment is process oriented. Next is traditional is practical and authentic is time intensive. Traditional is reliable and authentic is the individual feedback. Traditional is valid, also the authentic is valid. Next is traditional is summative while authentic is formative. And last, traditional is fosters extrinsic motivation while authentic is fosters intrinsic motivation.